Hiya, I'm going to talk about Dashcam 2021, the latest film I've seen. Wow, it's a horror thriller and I'm seeing these occasionally. I'm not a big fan of horror, and this is seriously visceral at times, very gory. There's a lot of blood and other body fluids, horrific stuff in it. However, I don't really want to not see films. I explained that when I saw Thanksgiving last year. I can't ignore a whole genre of films. I don't think I actually noticed it was horror when it came up on the streaming list. It starts off with a young woman called Annie Hardy. She's in California, in Los Angeles, and it's during lockdown. I guess it's probably the first COVID lockdown. I don't really know how the lockdowns worked in California or in the USA as a whole. I've got friends there and I noticed they were wearing masks a lot longer than in the UK, but we had lockdown 2 in November 2020 after the initial one in March. April 2020, that was the most shocking lockdown in many ways. By November 2020, when we went into the second lockdown, we were at least allowed to meet friends outside, so it wasn't quite as severe. It was a bit more like the later stages of the first lockdown, sort of May into June, July. That wasn't as bad as the early days. In this film, though, this character Annie, who appears to be played by Annie Hardy. I think quite a lot of the characters seem to have the same names as the actors. I've just looked up a little bit about the film. It's semi-fictionalized, so I try not to look up too much about films, but the character she plays is certainly a COVID denier, and she's got these problematic views of the world. She says a lot of strange things. Still, I'm trying not to look up too much, well, certainly about the film itself, before I put out my thoughts about it. Her character certainly is not very pleasant. Oh gosh, the amount of misogyny, the awful stuff. I mean, she's creative, and I think the film is really innovative. I'll say more about how it ends, not the spoiler element, but the credits. I've always thought that when you're in the cinema at the end of a film, it would be really nice if every person in any role, everything, catering, the people doing the admin, the clearances, all those people ought to have an opportunity to be named and have a photo, maybe even something about them. It would go by very fast in the cinema, where it can still last 10 minutes. And the credits in this lasted 11 minutes. Annie does the same thing. She gives the whole cast the same sort of treatment in her rap. She's got this band car. It's called a band car. She sort of raps along and is creative in her responses to people. She's very quick-witted, and she says something about each person in the cast, not just the cast members, but the film crew and a lot of other people. So she's sitting in a car going through everyone and saying something often pretty disgusting. There's no holds barred in this film. There's a lot of horrific, offensive language and attitudes towards people. She talks about really awful things. When she started rapping right at the end, I was thinking, wow, she's slandering people. However, I imagine it was consensual. The film wouldn't go out. It was probably encouraged. I love it as an innovative ending to a film. However, let's get back to the start. You see her driving along and Annie goes live. So she's like an influencer. She just connects up to the internet, and while she's driving, she will make up little ditties, stuff that scans, some of them very creative and witty. And she does this all the way, and you then get to see her followers, the people commenting. And of course, it's like most of social media. I mean, you can curate your threads, your Facebook. You might not be able to so easily with the platform formerly known as Twitter. Oh gosh, I won't go much into that, but there's that type of toxic rhetoric, and on Threads I can easily block anyone I don't want to read their bile, their toxic hatred of half of humanity. And all the words, I mean, there's just horrific words. And all of this in a sidebar in this film, a lot of the film. The comments in the sidebar are creatively made by a team of the cast. So Annie goes live, she starts rapping, and people start commenting about everything they see on screen and lots of other stuff. She doesn't want to be in LA, it seems, so she splits for the UK. She gets on a plane and she comes to London, of all places. It's kind of scary who you might meet on the streets, whatever attitude they have. That's kind of disturbing, I find. One thing she quips fairly early on is talking about someone being a bigot because they are criticising her views. However, the whole point of saying anything is that there's freedom of speech to a large extent, except for shouting fire in the cinema, causing panic and inciting hatred and racism and a lot of other problematic attitudes. There's an awful lot of freedom of speech. If you don't believe me, have a look at the internet, have a look at this film. They do have breaks. It isn't completely throughout the film. There are times when things get really horrible, messy, and the live stream stops. Oh gosh. So anyway, so she comes to London, a friend of hers, and she finds a key under a rock and she lets herself in, she breaks in, and she scares the life out of her friend. She's got this awful thing where I can't remember what it's called, but she spits on her hand and then slaps the face of her friend. Oof. So she spits on her hand and slaps on the friend. And there's quite a few incidents like that throughout this film. This is just the first few minutes. I'm not going to go into the spoilers, but what happens is she falls out with her London friend and his girlfriend, more so with her. The first part, there isn't that much visceral horror, but it builds up. A few minutes further in, and I was wondering if I could carry on watching the whole film. I was thinking, wow, I mean, it's 76 minutes total, but I thought, oh my gosh, I've got a whole hour still to go. What on earth is going to happen? I did watch it, really don't like bodily fluids, and there's all sorts of that. But it was also fairly fascinating to watch. There was some stuff that was fantasy, supernatural, let's say, but there was subjects like people trafficking. It's sort of set largely in London, suburbs, somewhere, I guess, close to the countryside, maybe Thorpe Park or Chessington or somewhere like that. I looked up the address that is shown because she steals Stretch's car, Stretch's her mate. Timberline Way doesn't exist in the UK as far as I can tell. I'm sure there's some people who would absolutely love this film, but it's pretty dispiriting stuff. I'm going to score this 7 out of 10 because it was innovative, it was an interesting film. I just don't think I can watch it again. It's a record of how things were around the lockdown. Historical records, even if they're fictionalised, are very interesting. It took me right back to that time. I'd love to know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Please like if you like this, and thanks if you subscribe. Hopefully see you again soon. I really would like to know your thoughts, especially you have to really steal yourself because some of the stuff I've seen a fair number of horror films over the years. It's just a new take for the 20s, the 2020s. It's an era that we'll look back on, and I might read up a bit more about this. I think it is one of those films that could be commented on further, but I have other films I'd like to review. Thanks once again. Bye for now.